on Chapter 13, so here I will resume. The CIA's internal controls the Inspector General and the Office of General Counsel. Both the General Counsel and the Inspector General have played and will continue to play vital roles in the internal management of the Central Intelligence Agency. Both report directly to and provide guidance to the Director of Central Intelligence Agency. As the principal legal officer of the agency, the General Counsel provides legal advice to the Director of Central Intelligence. He also provides counsel and guidance to employees at all levels within the agency on legal issues connected with the conduct of the CIA's mission. The Inspector General serves as the investigative arm of the Director and, when necessary, of the General Counsel, as well as assisting the Director and Deputy Directors in improving the performance of CIA offices and personnel. Under the mandate of Senate Resolution 21, the Senate Select Committee studied both offices with particular attention given to the role of each in assuring that CIA activities are consistent with the Constitution and the laws of the United States. Footnote 1. Reading footnote 1. Several provisions in the resolution seem particularly applicable to a review of the offices of General Counsel and the Inspector General. Among them are 1. Section 4, which mandates examination of the extent to which federal law enforcement or intelligence agencies coordinate their activities, and the extent to which a lack of coordination has contributed to illegal, improper, or inefficient actions. 2. Section 5, which mandates examination of the extent to which the operation of any activities in the United States by the Central Intelligence Agency conforms to the legislative charter of that agency and to the intent of Congress. 3. Section 6, which mandates an examination of the relationship between the Director of Central Intelligence's responsibility to protect, quote, intelligence sources and methods, end quote, and the prohibition on the agency's exercise of police, subpoena, law enforcement powers, or internal security functions. 4. Section 8, which mandates an examination of the nature and extent to which federal agencies cooperate in exchanging intelligence information and the adequacy of any regulations or statutes which govern such cooperation. 5. Section 9, which mandates an examination of the extent to which the intelligence agencies are governed by executive orders, rules, or regulations, and the extent to which these regulations contradict the intent of Congress. 6. Section 10, which mandates an examination of the violation or suspected violation of state or federal statutes. 7. Section 11, which mandates an examination of the need for improved, strengthened, or consolidated oversight of the United States intelligence activities by Congress. And 8. Section 12, which mandates an examination of whether any of the existing laws of the United States are inadequate, either in their provisions or in enforcement to safeguard the rights of American citizens. Resuming the reading. A number of current and former officials of the Central Intelligence Agency were interviewed or disposed. A far greater number were asked to, and did, respond in writing to a detailed questionnaire on the work of these offices. Footnote 2. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 2. Some 24 questionnaires were sent out. There were 15 responses ranging from 3 pages to 14 pages. Resuming the reading. On the basis of this investigation, The committee is convinced of the importance of these offices and the need to maintain and strengthen them. End of page 280. Beginning page 281. Section A. The General Counsel. The General Counsel's work and responsibilities have changed over time, reflecting changes in CIA activities and the needs and desires of different directors. The General Counsel's office had originally a staff of 10 to 12 attorneys, which was concerned with enactment of the agency charter and enabling legislation, and with creation of regulations and administrative and financial procedures under which the agency would operate. In the 1950s and 1960s, the office was largely directed toward assisting clandestine activities overseas. Currently, the Office of the General Counsel, with a staff of roughly 30 attorneys, is primarily concerned with, quote, proposals for legislation, executive orders, and other directives governing agency activities, legal input into planning and approval of operations, stricter management and financial controls, litigation, Freedom of Information Act and Privacy Act matters, and response to requirements of select and standing committees of Congress, end quote. Footnote 2A. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 2A. Quote, the role and functions of the General Counsel, end quote. CIA paper prepared for the Senate Select Committee, December 75, page 2. Resuming the reading. Subsection 1. The organization of the Office of General Counsel. Between January 19, 1951 and April 1, 1962, the General Counsel was technically a part of the Directorate of Administration, but in fact the General Counsel reported directly to the Director of Central Intelligence on most matters. In 1962, the office was moved to the Office of the Director. Footnote 3. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 3. IBID, December 75, page 2. With the exception of 1 year in the 1950s, the General Counsel was also responsible for the supervision of the CIA's liaison with Congress. In 1966, a separate Office of Legislative Counsel was created. The Legislative Counsel is responsible for the CIA's liaison with Congress and reports to the Director of Central Intelligence. Resuming the reading. The organization of the Office of General Counsel remained basically unchanged from the inception of the agency until October 1975. The office was then reorganized internally into 4 specialized divisions in order to permit more effective handling of the legal problems of the agency. The 4 divisions are General Law Division, Operations and Management Law Division, Freedom of Information and Privacy Law Division, and Procurement and Contracts Law Division. 2 attorneys are presently assigned as special assistants to the General Counsel. One of these has been assigned to the Deputy Director for Operations to provide more timely and effective counsel in the earliest stages of sensitive operational matters. The other has been assigned to the Office of Logistics, which requires continuous legal assistance in its responsibility for managing most CIA contracts. The agency is considering assigning attorneys to the other directorates and independent offices. Until this year, most of the lawyers in the Office of General Counsel had been recruited from within the agency, although some of these attorneys had had legal experience outside the CIA. The Rockefeller Commission recommended, and the CIA had spent considerable effort in recruiting lawyers from outside the agency. Footnote 5. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 5. According to the CIA, as of April 1976, over half of the attorneys employed in the Office of General Counsel will have come from outside the CIA. Resuming the reading. Lawrence Houston, the General Counsel of the Central Intelligence, end of page 281, beginning page 282. Agency, from 1947 until 1974, agreed with the Rockefeller Commission recommendation, noting that legal experience, particularly in private practice, would help agency attorneys exercise independent judgment. Mr. Houston also recommended that attorneys be rotated from the Office of General Counsel to other government agencies. Footnote 6. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 6. The CIA has endorsed the idea, but has told the committee that organizationally it would be difficult to implement. Letter from William Colby to the Select Committee, January 27, 76, page 7. Resuming the reading. Such rotation would lessen the possibility that these attorneys would become part of a culture which assumes that, for reasons of national security, the CIA is not governed by normal processes of the law. Just prior to his leaving the CIA, then Director Colby elevated the Inspector General to an executive rank equal to that of the deputy directors of the CIA. He then agreed that the General Counsel should be similarly promoted, but no action was taken, leaving the General Counsel below the deputy directors and the Inspector General in rank. Subsection 2. The functions of the Office of General Counsel. The General Counsel has a wide range of responsibilities. As noted above, his primary responsibility is to advise the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, although he also provides legal advice and guidance to employees at all levels. Under CIA regulations, he is also responsible for reviewing all new projects and activities unless they are clearly established as legal, ensuring the legality of the expenditure of confidential funds. Footnote 7. Pausing the reading, reading footnote 7. Section 8B of the CIA Act of 1949, as amended, 50 U.S.C. 403J.B. provides, quote, "The sums made available to the agency may be expended without regard to the provisions of law and regulations relating to the expenditure of government funds, and for objects of a confidential, extraordinary, or emergency nature, such expenditures to be accounted for solely on the certificate of the Director, and every such certificate shall be deemed a sufficient voucher for the amount therein certified," end quote. Normally, the General Counsel of the General Accounting Office would rule on the legality of the expenditure of government funds, but given 50 U.S.C. 403J.B. and the decision by the General Accounting Office to cease even the partial audits of CIA expenditures, which he had conducted up until the early 1960s, the CIA's General Counsel has the responsibility for determining the legality of unvouchered expenditures. Quote, "The role and functions of the General Counsel," end quote. December 1975, pages 3 to 4. Resuming the reading. Reported possible violations of the U.S. Criminal Code by CIA employees to the Department of Justice, passing upon all regulatory issuances, coordinating legal issues involved in the CIA relations with non-agency individuals and institutions, determining legal standards for all requests made to the CIA by or made by the CIA to other government agencies, and establishing proprietaries and cover mechanisms for operations. Under Executive Order 11905, he is also required to report to the Intelligence Oversight Board any activities which raise questions of legality or propriety. Subsection 3. The General Counsel's role in determining the legality or propriety of CIA activities. As the Director's chief legal advisor, the General Counsel is responsible for determining the legality or propriety of CIA activities. CIA regulations recognize this and provide that, quote, to ensure that CIA activities are in compliance with the law, deputy directors and heads of, end of page 282, beginning page 283, independent offices shall consult with the Office of General Counsel on all activities whose legality is not clearly established. Footnote 8. Pausing the reading footnote 8. CIA Headquarters Regulation, quote, restrictions on CIA activities within the United States or related to U.S. citizens and organizations, end quote. November 28th, 75. 7-1A, 3, page 1. Resuming the reading. While responsible for making determinations about the legality or propriety of CIA activities, the General Counsel also has an obligation to assist in the accomplishment of the agency's missions. As the Rockefeller Commission report put it, quote, he is subject to pressures to find legal techniques to facilitate proposed activities, end quote. Footnote 9. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 9. Report of the Commission on CIA Activities within the United States. June 6, 75, page 87. Resuming the reading. This dual responsibility with its potential for conflict is not in itself unique. Almost any, quote, inside, end quote, counsel is in a similar position, but the secret and often sensitive nature of CIA activities does make protection of the independence of his judgment particularly important. As can be seen from the regulation, the role of the Office of General Counsel is essentially passive. Footnote 10. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 10. As Lawrence Houston wrote, quote, the role could be almost completely passive, but as a matter of practice, it is and should be active in the sense of keeping informed as far as possible and feeling free to raise possible problems at whatever level seems appropriate, end quote. A letter from Lawrence Houston to the Senate Select Committee, January 76, page 1. The present Deputy General Counsel has noted that, given the General Counsel's new responsibilities under Executive Order 11905 and changes in attitudes at the agency, the role will be anything but passive. Resuming the reading. He does not initiate inquiries, but rather consults upon request. In the past, the General Counsel has not been asked for his opinion on certain sensitive agency programs. During the 20-year course of the CIA's mail opening program, the General Counsel was never asked for an opinion on its legality or propriety. When the Director of Central Intelligence had doubts about whether Operation Chaos violated the agency charter, he did not turn to the General Counsel. As former DCI Helms stated, quote, sometimes we did, in brackets, consult the General Counsel, in brackets. Sometimes we did not. I think the record on that is rather spotty, quite frankly, end quote. footnote 11. Pausing the reading and reading footnote 11. Richard Helms' testimony, September 10th, 75, page 59. Resuming the reading. When the General Counsel was asked for an opinion about CIA activities, which were, quote, questionable, end quote, his advice was heeded. For example, when the CIA participated in an NSA program to monitor telephone calls to and from Latin America, the General Counsel was asked for an opinion. The opinion he issued described the telephone intercept program as illegal, with the result that the program was immediately terminated. Footnote 11a. See the committee's detailed report on NSA monitoring for a detailed discussion of this activity and its termination. The principal reason for the lack of consultation was that a review by the General Counsel was not required for the initiation of agency activities. As James Angleton has testified, quote, in brackets, it is my impression that one of our weaknesses is that we did not have the General Counsel work into the planning phases of operations. Usually we went to the General Counsel when something was going wrong, but not in the inception of operations. End quote. Footnote 12. James Angleton testimony, September 17, 75, page 48. End of page 283, beginning page 284. The CIA has explained that because of the infinite variety of matters arising which would be susceptible to or might benefit from legal advice, there has been no established mechanism requiring or permitting the General Counsel to advise or rule in all cases. Some of his responsibilities are set forth in regulations or other procedures or are well known, whereas others depend on the initiative of the individual office seeking advice. Each director of Central Intelligence has had his own preferences in methods of operating the agency and seeking advice from the various components of the agency. Because of the extremely sensitive nature of some activities, there have been times when directors have chosen to carry them out directly rather than through the normally responsible components of the agency in order to involve as few people as possible. In some cases, a director may not think to seek legal advice or may choose not to do so. In choosing to operate in this manner, the director is carrying out to a degree he deems necessary his charter responsibility to protect intelligence sources and methods from unauthorized disclosure. On the other hand, he must then make his own determination as to whether this responsibility justifies some aspect of the operation which might otherwise be questionable under law. In brackets, emphasis added, in brackets. Footnote 13. Pausing the reading footnote 13. Quote, the role and functions of the General Counsel. December 75, page 6.
Resuming the reading. Under this view, the director can still withhold from his counsel the very existence of a particular activity. The DCI could be in the position of deciding, without advice from his counsel, whether the DCI's legal responsibility to protect intelligence sources justified activities which would be questionable under law. Even under the present regulation requiring consultation with the General Counsel on all activities whose legality is not clearly established, it is possible that the General Counsel would not be asked for an opinion about the legality or propriety of a major CIA activity. The director could waive the regulation and instruct the appropriate official not to consult with the General Counsel. In addition, the standards in the regulation itself may cause certain difficulties. The regulation leaves the determination of whether an activity has been clearly established as legal to the deputy directors and the heads of independent offices. Thus, these officers must interpret past decisions by the General Counsel and decide their applicability to new activities. They must interpret the regulation itself and in particular the phrase which reads whose legality is not clearly established in order to determine whether consultation is required. Because the regulations are prospective, activities which were legal in the past, but which have become illegal due to changes in the law, might not be the subject of consultation. End of page 284. Beginning of page 285. It would certainly be possible to require consultation with the General Counsel on all significant activities. Footnote 14. Pausing the reading, and reading footnote 14. While the deputy directors and heads of independent offices would have to interpret the meaning of significant, they are in a better position to do this than to make judgments about the applicability of past opinions of the General Counsel. Some threshold is required in order that the General Counsel's office not be swamped by a requirement to review every action by every employee. Resuming the reading. The General Counsel would be given a description of the activity. The referring office's reasons for believing the activity is legal might be included to enable the General Counsel to avoid a de novo review. Certain acts undertaken by the CIA which may not appear significant because they do not require the expenditure of a great deal of money or the efforts of large numbers of personnel are nonetheless significant due to their potential for abuse. Consultation with the General Counsel should be required before the initiation of any such act. For instance, under present regulations, the Director may approve investigations of allegations of unauthorized disclosure of classified information by individuals presently or formerly affiliated with the CIA, if he determines that intelligence sources and methods may be jeopardized by the disclosure. Footnote 15. Pausing the reading, and reading footnote 15. The investigation must be coordinated with the FBI, when substantial evidence suggests espionage or other violation of a federal statute. CIA 7-1C, 2, B, 1. Resuming the reading. There have been a number of such investigations in the past which resulted in the extensive surveillance of newsmen, as well as a breaking and entering by CIA with the assistance of local police officials. Thus, even though the CIA recognized that such investigations required special procedures, there is no requirement that the chief legal officer of the agency be consulted. Footnote 16. Pausing the reading, and reading footnote 16. As the CIA's former General Counsel has noted, the Office of General Counsel should be consulted in connection with investigations of disclosure of classified information, or for any surveillance within the U.S. Houston Letter, 176th, p. 1. Present regulations provide that the Office of General Counsel must be consulted when equipment for monitoring conversations is being tested in the United States. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, H.R. 7-1D5, as that testing raises many of the same issues as does an investigation of unauthorized disclosure of classified information, there seems to be no reason for excluding the Office of General Counsel from the approval process for an investigation. Resuming the reading. The CIA has taken the position that the General Counsel's approval is not required for each such act. The General Counsel's approval of the regulations governing such acts is considered sufficient. This underestimates the difficulties deputy directors or heads of independent offices might have in interpreting regulations, and creates the possibility that actions not consonant with regulations could be approved and undertaken. Requests for assistance made by the CIA to other governmental agencies and requests to the CIA from other agencies raise similar. End of page 285, beginning page 286. Issues. Footnote 17. Reading footnote 17. Under present regulations, the Inspector General is required to obtain a written opinion from the General Counsel on requests for continuation or initiation of activities in support of or in cooperation with state, local, or other federal agencies whose legality and propriety have not been previously established. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7-1B, 1. This language has the same shortcomings noted above. The deputy director or the head of the independent office must interpret the regulation and previous decisions of the Office of General Counsel. The regulation ignores the possibility of a change in legal standards. Written opinions of the General Counsel are generally not required by regulation or statute. The absence of a written opinion does not mean that the General Counsel did not provide advice. In many situations, oral opinions have been offered. Given proper security restrictions, however, an increase in the number of situations in which written opinions are required might be desirable, as it might tend to increase the level of scrutiny by the Office of General Counsel. Resuming the reading. While the General Counsel must concur with the Deputy Director for operations on the provision of technical equipment to the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, for overseas operations, footnote 18, and must approve CIA requests for federal income tax information, footnote 19, he is not involved in the approval process for seeking assistance from state and local police organizations. Footnote 20. It should be remembered that such assistance has been provided in circumstances which were highly questionable. Footnote 21. Pausing the reading, to read the before-mentioned footnotes. Footnote 18. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7-1B, 5, c. Footnote 19. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7-1C, 9. Footnote 20. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7-1B, 3, b. Footnote 21. In one instance, local police assisted the CIA in a breaking and entering. Resuming the reading. The General Counsel is not involved in the approval process for providing technical guidance, training, equipment, and other assistance to the Department of Defense for intelligence activities within the United States. Footnote 22. Such equipment might be used by the Defense Department for illegal surveillance of citizens. In each of these situations, the Central Intelligence Agency has established special procedures for approval and monitoring. Where such procedures were imposed because of the sensitivity of the operations, the procedures should specifically include consultation with the General Counsel. Subsection 4. The General Counsel's role with regard to reports of activities that raise questions of legality or propriety. Subsection A. The General Counsel's responsibilities. Present regulations provide that any activities or proposed activities that may raise questions of compliance with the law or CIA regulations or that otherwise appear improper will be brought directly to the attention of the Director by any of the command or staff components or by the IG and will be subject to the Director's decision. Footnote 23. Pausing the reading to read footnote 23. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7 Law, 4. Similar regulations require that any employee who has knowledge of past, current or proposed CIA activities that might be construed to be illegal, improper, or outside CIA's legislative charter, or who believes that he or she has received instructions that in any way appear illegal, improper, or outside CIA's legislative charter, is instructed to inform the Director or Inspector General immediately. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7 Law, 6. Resuming the reading. In the past, questionable activities which came to the attention of the Director or the Inspector General were not always referred to the General Counsel. For example, during a survey of the technical services. End of page 286. Beginning of page 287. Division in 1957, the Inspector General discovered activities which he labeled unethical and illicit, but he did not notify the General Counsel. Nor was the General Counsel informed about the surreptitious administration of LSD to unwitting human subjects, discovered by the Inspector General in 1963. Footnote 24. Pausing the reading to read footnote 24. A former IG explained that his reason for withholding from the agency's general counsel information on CIA's mail opening, which he believed to be illegal, was that the general counsel has already been excluded by other senior officials. An operation of this sort in the CIA is run if it is closely held, it is run by those people immediately concerned, and to the extent that it is really possible, according to the practices that we had in the 50s and 60s, those persons not immediately concerned were supposed to be ignorant of it. Gordon Stewart Deposition, September 30, 75, p. 29. Next tab. Next tab. Next tab. Resuming the reading. Under the recently issued executive order. Footnote 25. The General Counsel is personally responsible for reporting to the Intelligence Oversight Board any activities that raise questions of legality or propriety. Footnote 26. Pausing the reading to read the mentioned footnotes. Footnote 25. Executive Order 11905. Footnote 26. The Inspector General has an identical responsibility to that of the General Counsel, under the terms of the Executive Order. Resuming the reading. However, CIA regulations do not explicitly require the Director or the Inspector General to notify the General Counsel of questionable activities reported to them. The Director may waive the regulation and may instruct the Inspector General not to inform the General Counsel. Footnote 27. Pausing the reading to read footnote 27. The Inspector General would still have to report the questionable activity to the Intelligence Oversight Board. If the Director instructs him not to, he must inform the IOB of that instruction. Resuming the reading. While the Inspector General is required by regulation to refer to the General Counsel all matters involving legal questions that come to the attention of the Inspector General, footnote 28, an additional, more specific, regulation only requires that the Inspector General refer to the General Counsel information, allegations, or complaints of violations of the criminal provisions of the United States Code by CIA officers and employees, or relating to CIA affairs. Pausing the reading to read footnote 28. CIA Headquarters Regulation, Office of the Inspector General, 1-3A. Resuming the reading. Subsection B. Investigations by the Office of the General Counsel. If the General Counsel does learn of questionable activities, he must rely on the Office of the Inspector General to investigate. Unlike the Inspector General who, as the DCI's investigative arm, is authorized to review all CIA activities, the General Counsel does not have general investigatory authority. The Office of General Counsel can initiate an investigation, with the specific authorization of the Director. This requirement might prevent the General Counsel investigation of an activity about which the Director sought to restrict knowledge. If the Director refused to authorize an investigation by the General Counsel, the General Counsel could resign and notify the appropriate authorities. Footnote 29. Pausing the reading to read footnote 29. These could include the IOB or its successor and the appropriate congressional committees. Resuming the reading. Alternately, the Director could be required to provide an immediate explanation in writing to the appropriate committees. End of page 287. Beginning of page 288. Of the Congress and the Executive Branch of the reasons for denial of investigatory authority. Footnote 30. Pausing the reading to read footnote 30. A report to the Intelligence Oversight Board may already be required. Executive Order 11905 requires the General Counsel to report to the IOB any occasion on which he was directed by the DCI not to report any activity to the IOB. Resuming the reading. The General Counsel could be provided by regulation with general investigatory authority within the CIA, but this would have certain drawbacks. It could strain the General Counsel's relationship with the DCI. Lawrence Houston argued that to give OGC investigative authority similar to that of the IG would pervert its counseling role and thereby inhibit or destroy its prime usefulness. Footnote 31. Houston noted that even if the General Counsel has the support of the DCI, he will not be aware of everything going on at the agency. Investigative authority would not give him much more and would inhibit his relations with his clients. Footnote 32. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 31. Houston Letter, 176, p. 1. Footnote 32. Ibid p.1. Resuming the reading. Provision of general investigative authority to the Office of General Counsel might also involve duplication of work now done by the Inspector General. Duplication of effort in detecting and preventing abuses might be helpful rather than harmful. In all likelihood, however, in the usual course of events, the General Counsel would ask the Inspector General to investigate rather than relying on his own resources. Subsection C. The General Counsel's access to information. Even if the General Counsel is consulted about all significant activities and if he is notified of all reports of questionable activities, it remains to ensure that the General Counsel will have access to necessary information. The former General Counsel does not recall ever being denied information. The record, however, is clear that a good deal of information bearing directly on the legality or propriety of agency operations was never given him. According to the Central Intelligence Agency, if an office should question the request of the General Counsel for access to any particular information, any limitations would be imposed by the Director. Thus, even today, the Director remains able to deny information to the General Counsel bearing on the legality or propriety of CIA activities. Executive Order 11,905, however, requires that the Director ensure that the General Counsel has access to any information necessary to perform his duties under the order. Lawrence Houston has suggested that the General Counsel could resign if denied access to information. The Director might be required to provide an immediate explanation to the appropriate bodies of the residential sons for such a denial. Footnote 33. Pausing the reading to read footnote 33. Ibid. p. 2. The General Counsel might be required under the terms of Executive Order 11,905 to report the refusal of access to the 1014. Resuming the reading. Subsection D. Reporting possible violations of the U.S. Criminal Code to the Attorney General. Finally, it should be noted that in the past the General Counsel did not always report possible violations of the U.S. Criminal Code to the Department of Justice. Under the terms of a 1954 agreement with the Department of Justice, the Central Intelligence. End of page 288, beginning of page 289. Agency was essentially delegated the Department of Justice's power to determine whether criminal prosecution should be initiated against individuals who violated federal law. This delegation was and is unacceptable. The agreement has now been terminated. Under present regulations, the Inspector General must inform the General Counsel of information, allegations, or complaints of violations of the criminal provisions of the United States Code by CIA officers and employees, or relating to CIA affairs. Footnote 34. The Inspector General must also report to the General Counsel results of the Inspector General's investigation, which is aimed at developing sufficient facts to determine if a crime has been committed, and whether prosecution may compromise international relations, national security, or foreign intelligence sources and methods. Footnote 35. The General Counsel will refer those cases where sufficient information has been developed to determine that a crime has been committed, as well as the Inspector General's report on the effect of prosecution, to the Department of Justice. Footnote 36. Under Executive Order 11,905, the General Counsel is not required to report to the Attorney General, but rather must report to the Intelligence Oversight Board. Footnote 37. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 34. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 7-1A, 7, p. 1. Footnote 35. CIA Headquarters Regulation, November 28, 75, 1-3A, 2, e. Footnote 36. Ibid. The regulations further provide that reporting of the fact of a crime will not be delayed for an evaluation of whether the prosecution will raise questions of national security. Footnote 37. The General Counsel may already be required to report to the Attorney General under provisions of the U.S. Code. Resuming the reading. Because of the suspicions aroused by the disclosure of the CIA Department of Justice agreement and the need to renew public confidence, it may be necessary to require that the appropriate congressional committees be given notice of CIA referrals of possible criminal violations to the Department of Justice. If this were to be done, great care would have to be taken to avoid any possibility of prejudicing the investigation or prosecution. Section 5. Oversight of the Office of General Counsel. Because the General Counsel's principal duty is to provide legal advice and guidance to the Director of Central Intelligence, the Director must be primarily responsible for evaluating his work. Unlike other CIA offices, however, the Office of the General Counsel has never been the subject of inspection by the Office of the Inspector General. The General Counsel's work has not gone totally unreviewed. In 1951, a New York law firm conducted a brief review of the Office of General Counsel. Within the last year, the Department of Justice conducted a management survey of the office at the request of the Director. Given the importance of the General Counsel's office, the absence of regular formal reviews is to be regretted. Section 6. Executive Branch Oversight of the Office of General Counsel. At present, the General Counsel is required to transmit to the Oversight Board reports of any activities that come to his attention that raise questions of legality or propriety. Footnote 38. Pausing the reading. Footnote 38. Executive Order 11905. Resuming the reading. He is also required. End of page 289. Beginning of page 290. To report to the Department of Justice all incidents involving possible violations of the U.S. Criminal Code as well as the results of investigations by the Inspector General. There are no requirements, however, that he provide General Counsel opinions or regular reports on the work of the office to anyone outside the CIA. Next tab. Next tab. Next tab. According to the Central Intelligence Agency, regular provision of General Counsel opinions outside the agency might raise serious problems. To place such requirement would be violative of command relationships and lawyer-client privilege. The Director, at his option, could make such reports available as he deemed necessary. Footnote 39. Pausing the reading to read footnote 39. Letter from William Colby to the Senate Select Committee, January 27, 76, p. 7. It has also been argued that because many of the opinions are on technical matters, regularly supplying them to those outside the CIA would not be useful. Walter Fortzheimer, formerly the Legislative Counsel of the CIA, suggested that a general report, oral or in writing, on major legal problems facing the agency, or the need for additional statutory support. Footnote 40. Could be provided to such groups as the National Security Council. Pausing the reading to read footnote 40. Letter from Walter Fortzheimer to the Senate Select Committee, January 26, 76, p. 9. Resuming the reading. The IOB or other such groups could be supplied legal opinions in especially sensitive areas, such as those dealing with activities that might infringe on the right of Americans. Subsection 7. Congressional Oversight of the Office of General Counsel. The same chain of command and lawyer-client privilege problems might arise if General Counsel's opinions were regularly provided to congressional oversight committees. yet similar solutions which would greatly aid congressional oversight regular, more general reports, footnote 41, and the provision of particular opinions or all opinions in specific sensitive areas could be devised. Footnote 42. The Senate has another means by which to oversee the General Counsel, the confirmation process. Congress could require that the General Counsel be nominated by the President subject to confirmation by the Senate. This might increase the independence and stature. Footnote 43. Of the General Counsel. It would parallel provisions for presidential nomination and senatorial confirmation of the General Counsels of executive branch departments and independent regulatory bodies. But eliminating appointment by the DCI might reduce the confidence which the Director has in his chief legal advisor. Section B. The Office of the Inspector General. The Inspector General reports to the Director and assists him in his attempts to assure that CIA activities are consistent with the agency's charter regulations and the Constitution and laws of. End of page 290. Beginning page 291. The United States. In addition, the Office of the Inspector General has a wide range of responsibilities designed to improve the performance of CIA offices and personnel. The Inspector General now holds rank equal to that of the Deputy Directors of the CIA. Subsection 1. Organizational history. The Office of the Inspector General had its origin in the establishment of an Executive for Inspections and Security, EIS, in the Central Intelligence Group, SIG. On July 1, 1947, EIS was charged to provide overall inspection, audit, and security for SIG. By 1951, audit and inspection functions had been separated. An audit office was established under the Deputy Director for Administration. In November 1951, a special assistant to the Director assumed the inspection function. He was appointed to the newly established position of Inspector General on January 1, 1952. In March 1953, the mission and functions of the Inspector General were formally defined. Footnote 44. Pausing the reading to read footnote 44. The issuance read. Mission. The Inspector General is charged with conducting investigations throughout the agency on behalf of the Director and with inspecting throughout the agency the performance of missions and exercise of functions of all CIA offices and personnel. Functions. The Inspector General shall a. Make recommendations with respect to the missions prescribed for the several offices of the agency and with respect to such procedures and methods as may assist the offices of the agency more fully to perform their respective functions. B. Make recommendations with respect to the proper assignment of missions and functions in the overall interests of the agency. C. Provide a forum where agency personnel may, on a highly confidential basis, confide suggestions or complaints which have not received satisfactory considerations through regular channels of command or through the procedures provided for in CIA Regulation No. 22-8. D. Perform such other functions as may be determined by the Director. Resuming the reading. In 1953, the DCI appointed Lyman B. Kirkpatrick as Inspector General. Footnote 45. Pausing the reading to read footnote 45. In December of 1961, upon Kirkpatrick's transfer, Deputy Inspector General David R. McLean was named Acting Inspector General. John Ehrman was appointed Inspector General in May 1962. In March 1968, John Ehrman retired and Gordon M. Stewart was appointed Inspector General. He, in turn, retired in January 1972, and was replaced by William V. Breaux. In June 1973, on William Breaux's retirement, Donald F. Chamberlain, the incumbent, was appointed Inspector General. Resuming the reading. M.R. Kirkpatrick obtained approval from the Director in April 1953 for an inspection program which included planned, periodic inspection of agency components, component inspections, Several inspectors were added to the IG staff to perform this function. However, the inspection and review staff in the Directorate of Plans retained responsibility for reviewing DDP components. By mid-1954, the IG staff had expanded to 15, and a program of component inspections was underway. In January 1955, the DCI authorized the IG to conduct independent inspections of DDP components, separate from the DDP's inspection and review staff inspections. By December 1959, the Office of the Inspector General had completed the first cycle of component inspections. On April 1, 1962, the audit staff was transferred from the Directorate of Support, DDS, to the Office of the Inspector General, and end of page 291. Beginning of page 292. The Inspector General was given responsibility for coordinating and directing the activities of the audit staff. The audit staff then had about 40 positions, its present authorized strength. In May of 1962, the positions of Chief of the Inspection Staff and Chief of the Audit Staff were established within the Office of the Inspector General. At the same time, the DCI approved an increase in the inspection staff from 15 to 29 positions so that all agency components could be inspected on a 2 to 3 year cycle, and all foreign field installations could be visited at least once a year. In December 1963, in response to a call for economy measures, the Inspector General reduced inspector positions from 18 to 14. In 1964, the Inspector General became concerned that the office lacked continuity because inspector positions were always filled by rotational assignment. He obtained approval from the Executive Director to establish 2 Executive Career Service permanent positions in the office. In June 1973, the Director abolished the component inspection program. Footnote 46. And reduced the inspection staff to 5 positions, including 2 positions to work on equal employment opportunity matters. The Inspector General's role was limited to conducting special investigations and studies, investigating charges of misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance, and handling grievance cases. In November 1974, the audit staff's functions were expanded to include independent program audits. Footnote 47. Of agency operations, which included some of the same things that the inspection staff had done previously. Footnote 48. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 46. According to the present Deputy Inspector General, the program was ended because M.R. Schlesinger and M.R. Colby believed that a good deal of the kind of information that we had produced in the preceding years was not recurrent, that we had had most of the serious problems in the agency, and that M.R. Colby more specifically felt that he bad new management approaches that he felt would match what the inspection staff had provided in the past. Scott Breckenridge Testimony, August 1, 76, pp. 4-5. Footnote 47. This function, as published in Agency Regulations on May 30, 1975, is described as follows.
Sorry, I'm gonna actually interject. That was actually March 1st, 76, not August. The AI reader. Well, actually, as I was copy pasting, it got it wrong. Another thing that it got wrong was, let me find it. It was a person's name. When mentioning this person, William V. Bro, it said William V instead of William V. Bro. So that's another correction. So, yeah, now let me see where I was. Yeah, so I'm going to. All right. And for part 25, I actually do intend to use the AI reader, even though I have the note right here. So I'm going to continue on.
Footnote 47. Conduct supplementary, independent program audits of agency operation.
Sorry, one moment. Too fast.
Conduct supplementary, independent program. Conduct supplementary, independent program audits of agency operations pursuant to the audit standards established by the Controller General. Such audits will cover agency-wide subject matter selected in coordination with the controller or directorate program selected in coordination with the deputy director concerned. For purposes of coordinating independent program audits, substantially qualified officers will be detailed to the audit staff. CIA Memorandum. Organizational History of the Office of Inspector General, 1275, p. 3. Footnote 48. Breckenridge, March 1, 76, p. 5. Resuming the reading. In July 1975, following the Rockefeller Commission recommendations, the Component Inspection Program was reinstituted. The EEO function positions were transferred to a new staff in the Office of the Director. As of April 1976, the staff of the Inspector General was authorized to include approximately 20 inspectors, and a new series of component inspections had been initiated. Subsection 2. The functions of the Office of the Inspector General. The responsibilities of the Office of the Inspector General are quite broad. Under CIA regulations, the Inspector General is charged with directing and coordinating the activities of the inspection staff and the audit staff in conducting special investigations. End of page 292, beginning page 293. Inspections of organizational components, and audits on behalf of the Director throughout the agency, both at headquarters and in the field, and performing such other functions as may be prescribed by the Director. This will be where the reading stops for this recording.